Welcome to the Aaron Werner podcast on iCode Media. In today's bonus episode, I talk with our good friend, Professor John Nolan, about his vision for vision, or Healthcare 3.0, and the role that carotenoids play in that. Great discussion. I share a little bit of insights into data that we've seen within my practice. And John shares a little bit of some research that he is currently working on. I know you'll enjoy the episode and the discussion. If you're attending the Vision Source Exchange, be sure to check out all of the wonderful lectures and activities, especially John's, where he does go into more detail on a vision for vision. The Myopia Collective. CooperVision and the AOA have partnered in a groundbreaking initiative to change the way optometrists in the U.S. treat children with myopia. The purpose of the Myopia Collective is to rally the profession of optometry and its allies to interrupt the status quo and elevate the new standard of care for children with myopia. Every individual is encouraged to become a member of the collective. By joining, you commit to taking action to help slow the progression of myopia in children. You'll receive updates and information about the collective and its work in the fight against myopia, gain access to educational opportunities and resources offered by the collective, and hear from change agents, the ambassador optometrists selected to serve as advocates for community and policy change that facilitates the mission of the collective. Scan the QR code or click on the link in the show notes to join the collective today. In the past, our focus revolved around prescribing MacuHealth or MacuHealth Plus to patients at risk of macular degeneration, while also recommending it to collegiate and professional athletes for enhanced contrast sensitivity in sports performance. However, this year's introduction of the Life Meter has been a game changer. The Life Meter revealed a concerning truth. Many of my patients have alarmingly low skin carotenoid levels, indicating potential deficiencies in essential body tissues like the retina and brain. Supported by over 30 peer-reviewed publications, Life Meter's accuracy, consistency, and effectiveness has been demonstrated across 2,000 subjects with diverse backgrounds. With this newfound insight, I can now have meaningful conversations about carotenoid levels with all of my patients, even those who may seem outwardly healthy. To learn more about this empowering technology, feel free to contact your MacuHealth representative or click on the link in the show notes. Together, let's optimize patient care and elevate their well-being.
Yes, sir.
Nice. All right.
Kids are just going to bed.
Just going to bed. Oh, we've got this on... She set this up live. All right. Well, we are live. So we'll be on our best behaviors.
I'm glad I didn't curse.
Yeah, we're good. So, John, super excited to have you on the Aaron Werner podcast, and we've chatted a little bit over email, and you brought up something recently that I want to explore, and you called it a vision for vision. And first time I read that in the email, I think I read it wrong because I said, "Well, he's got too many visions in a short sentence." But I put the right emphasis on the right word, and so a vision for vision, and that sounds pretty interesting. So I want to hear what your vision is for vision. But first, for those who don't know you, quick intro.
Well, firstly, thank you, Aaron, and thank you and congratulations for all your success on your own podcast and your work. It's very important that we have these type of conversations. I'm John Nolan. I'm a scientist, 25 years working on the topic of nutrition in the eye. My original training was as a nutritional biochemist, and then I did my Fulbright scholarship in the US in Medical College of Georgia with Max Notterly, one of the pioneers of macular pigment research. So ultimately I'm a scientist that fell in love with nutrition of the eye, and I've got to work with amazing people over the last 25 years, both nationally and internationally, of course, with all my colleagues in the US. And we're now at a time finally where I feel like we're having a very positive impact on clinic and therefore on patient health and patient care. So that's me. I work with a multidisciplinary team. One of the scientists on that team essentially. And every day feels like the beginning of something new and special, and we're very grateful to do the work we do. I'm based out of Southeast Technological University in Ireland, southeast of Ireland, and we have an established nutrition centre called the Nutrition Research Centre Ireland. So typically PhD students will start on their journey. Hopefully they get through the other side. But we have research technicians, we have vision scientists. Optometry has been a major part of what we do, and we have some exciting news in optometry. Maybe we can speak about later coming. But yeah, I work with, and we our recent work even has gone into low level of even like as early stage as school work, working with schools and how children prepare their lunch and are part of the preparation of their lunch and what that all means. So from the cradle to the dance floor is the vision for vision, and that's really what. And the reason why speaking to your good self and people like you is that genuinely I believe that, you know, optometry is primary gatekeeper to getting all this in motion and implementing science in real time, that we change how your practice works and we change how your patient benefits from meeting you, the doctor.
Yeah. No, I love that. It's we went to school to make a big difference, right?
Yeah.
And I think that leaving school, we stopped at just lenses, right? And we chase lenses so much, whether it's contact lenses, ophthalmic lenses, even you know, surgical IOL lenses, and how do I correct with the lens? And but there's so much more to it than that. And I wonder that when Dad was, when Dad started, and I'm fifth generation, so if you know, Dad or Grandpa or great grandpa had to deal with the same challenges we have, in the sense that, you know, they didn't go to McDonald's every day to buy food, and school lunches were probably a little bit better prepared for them when they went to school than it was for me when I went to school, and certainly for my kids when they're in school. So nutrition has got to play a significantly bigger role now than it did ever before.
I believe so, and maybe in a funny way, it's come in a cycle, and in so far as maybe the access to foods that, you know, your dad and your grandparents had in the same industry, and how that would have impacted on patients' vision would have been crucial. The other point is, you know, we live longer now, so the eye doctor, you have to deal with so much more and different than maybe your grandpa had to deal with. And so we celebrate aging, but we should only celebrate aging if we're all old and functional and happy and able to get around, and that's really the vision for vision. And if I think about it, and I've had to reflect a lot recently, if you know, in the early days as a scientist, you go out and present a study, so, you know, a research experiment that you conducted where maybe an outcome measure was vision, or how can we enhance vision with nutrition, and these are all the building blocks and the stepping stones to our knowledge base. But I suppose having had time to reflect and think and to look at how all of this research has mushroomed out within our own centre, but equally across all the researchers across the world, evident from what we see at the Bonn conference, the Brain and Ocular Nutrition Network. I think, you know, it's such an exciting time, because I started my PhD trying to study in some way, at least in part, a disease called macular degeneration, and it's here behind me. Where do I see it? It should be. Oh, there it is here. So this is my dissertation, 2005, right? So get to show you that. So that was the biggest book I've ever put together. But this dissertation was basically studying patients who were at risk of macular degeneration, and the research question was, you know, what's unique about these individuals that are at high risk of developing macular degeneration? So, of course, at that point you study all the risk factors like aging, genetics, complement factor H, ARMS2. These are the genetic risk factors. But basically, you assess that by asking someone, do you have a family history? And cigarette smoking was the other big ticket item at the time. Nutrition wasn't really in the picture. It was there coldly. But very quickly and very strongly we saw that nutrition was important. And then as part of my own PhD, we figured out how to measure macular pigment in the eye, how to measure the components of macular pigment in the blood, lutein, zeaxanthin. At that time we couldn't even measure mesozeaxanthin.
Oh, really?
It was masked under the zeaxanthin peak on the chromatogram. But the point is, we discovered that a common denominator between those who are going to go blind compared to those who are not going to go blind was linked back to the macular pigments in the eye. So we confirmed nutrition and specifically macular pigment as a risk factor for macular degeneration. And the really important piece about that was that we learned that, or we know that it's modifiable. And that was what the early research had to show was, okay, you're low, can you change it? And then you have to figure out how you source it. And you know, multiply 20 years plus on, and here we are now only getting at the stage where we're really implementing it. And, you know, I do congratulate American optometry for being major stakeholder in this, because it was American optometry for me that was brave enough to have a go at this, you know, to try and make differences and change. And when I say that out loud, I think of people like Mark Rourke, who unfortunately we've lost Mark tragically. He became ill, and you know, other scientists that have contributed greatly to the field. People, Stuart Richer, unfortunately, as well, of course. So there's all of these wonderful people that contributed so much. But optometry now understands, and I know you have tried to safely integrate this into your practice. But my vision is that we don't do it for disease. The big vision is that what we now know is that when we command nutrition of the eye with tested and certified nutrients at the right optimal amounts with certification programs, that we can make a difference to a tissue in the eye. But thereafter, we're changing what's going on in the brain. We're changing what's going on in the skin. And the newest research that I got to publish with Nicole Stringham, a wonderful scientist as well, has shown that these nutrients have a positive effect on reducing markers of inflammation in the blood. So cardiometabolic disease risk factor. Essentially, we get in front of the problem that causes the kind of inflammatory response. So you think of the blood system, and we have this balance of being alive, which is great. That means we've oxidative stress and we've inflammation. It's great to have all these stresses because it means there's something going on. But the job of nutrition, you know, not just in the eye but throughout our whole body, is to balance that.
Right. And
if you have the right nutrients, and I'm not talking about why we need nutrients for energy or why we need nutrients or food for proteins. That's all crucially important, of course. I'm talking about it at a bioactive level. So now what I say to people, well, what's good about good nutrition? Let's stop talking about the Mediterranean diet, which most people cannot and will not comply to. We like the Mediterranean diet. I like it. But, you know, ask yourself the question, what's good in the Mediterranean diet, relevant and relative to the eye? And essentially that's what science has done. We've identified the specifics of that. So, you know, plant-based foods, okay, that's carotenoids. What plant gives us the highest amount of carotenoid? And it's a marigold flower. So that's how when we do our supplement trials, we source our nutrients from the marigold flower. So science begins in the field, in the marigold field in Puebla. But my vision for Vision is that we introduce Health 3.0 very quickly. And Health 3.0 for me is simply a preventative, proactive approach with lifestyle and nutrition, and eye care is key to that. If you think of eye care, if we just step back for 1 second and look at what standard of care is, if we're to be really honest about it, in ophthalmology, it's wait until a patient's retina gets so sick that we can inject them with anti-VEGF therapy. So what percentage of ophthalmologists even have the conversation about nutrition or preventative eye care? It's very low. It's getting better. And I know, you know, you and your colleagues, at times your biggest challenge is to collaborate with the medical ophthalmologist in a way that the education that you provide to your patient, the information, the testing, doesn't get diluted when it gets into the mainstream. But we can't afford to allow everyone get sick and need injections. I don't want my mom to get sick and need injections.
Oh, no, of course not. And what I learned working with my retina team in San Diego is that their world and my world are vastly different, because I deal typically with healthy people or people that are not sick yet, right? Maybe on the verge of it, but typically not sick, where they deal with the other opposite end of the spectrum. And so I'm trying to trim down weeds so that the house doesn't catch fire during fire season in San Diego, right? I cut down the brush and make it safe, where they're already running into a raging inferno. And so where do we help patients not get to that point? And I think once I had that conversation with them, they were very open to understanding the differences, but even more so, and what I loved about your vision to vision is, before probably 2 years ago, I didn't talk about supplementation, I didn't talk about nutrition unless somebody was sick.
Okay.
And I woke up one day and I smacked myself in the forehead and said, that's the dumbest thing in the world, right? Because why would I wait for somebody to get sick when I can help them? And then I found myself talking to young athletes or parents of young athletes, because we have a lot of young baseball players and kids that go to college, and some of them make the pros. So I would talk to them, and I said, well, why am I only talking to them, right? So then it was either a high-performing athlete or a sick retina, or early sick retina. Why don't I just talk to everybody? And really the impetus for us was when we brought in LifeMeter, because we could measure everybody, and it gave me a starting point to have that conversation. It sounds really silly to say that I needed a number before I could start the conversation, but it was a catalyst to do so. And now we find that it's a conversation from kids to teenagers to adults, grandparents, great-grandparents, whoever it is, right? It's just part of what we do now.
Which is great. I mean, and just for note, I'm not critical of ophthalmology either. I don't blame them. They're totally overwhelmed, and so it's that. My point is that we need to do exactly what you suggest, which is help them, congratulations on successfully doing what you're doing with the LifeMeter, which, as you know, it's a screener. It measures total carotenoids in the skin. But what we do know is that, and we know there's, you can have 7 or 8 carotenoids in the skin depending on your diet, but what we do know is if you have a normal diet and then you use a supplement that is present and certified and tested, that we know that will change that number, because the participant, or the patient in your case, is their own control. So you're seeing from what they normally do, if you give them more. And remember, when you give them like a 22 milligram supplement, you're giving them 20 times more than what they're doing normally, even if they're healthy. And so that is going to have an effect. And the nice thing about the skin measurement is it correlates really well with what's going on in the eye, and therefore it's a biomarker of what's going on in the brain, because we know eye macular pigment carotenoid scores are very highly correlated with brain carotenoid scores. We know this from the wonderful work of Liz Johnson. They worked with centenarians who they had measured macular pigment, and those wonderful people donated their brains for analysis, and then using HPLC, which is basically a chemistry technique where you look at the exact tissue and then you see what's there. Very clearly we saw that there was a correlation. And around the same time in Ireland, we were working in collaboration with the TILDA study, the Irish Longitudinal Study on Aging. And in that population group, it was the first time that we correlated the measurements of macular pigment in the eye and brain function. Because we've done so much work on visual function, as you know, but brain function. And we saw really striking relationships in over 5,000 people in that. So highly convinced. And that was what led us into, Alzheimer's research and cognitive function. But yeah, I mean, the punchline here and the take-home message is, getting in front of this early. We know from the CREST trials and others that we can enhance visual performance for you, Aaron, and for me, and for everyone. We can do better. It's optimizing the internal lens, because you're enhancing the optics, you're enhancing the use of all that wonderful light that gets to the back of the eye. You're getting rid of and reducing at least the blue part at the fovea, so right where we have no photoreceptors for blue. We're getting rid of that noise. We're clearing up the light scatter. We're enhancing contrast sensitivity. So if the job of an eye doctor is to enhance vision, we've figured out how to do it. And that's the celebration of our time. So it's wonderful.
No, it is, and it definitely makes a difference. In fact, I don't think you've seen this yet. A couple months ago, I had a patient come in and said, hey, you told me to take that the MacuHealth stuff, and I said, yeah, and he said, I thought you were full of it, but he had just had a bunch of health issues. So he goes, fine, I'll do it. I thought you were just selling me something. He goes, but is it weird if I tell you that my night vision feels like it's better? And I said, no, not weird at all. I said, by the way, we do your life meter on every time somebody comes in the office. We do a reading on it. And he goes, yeah, I've only been on it for not quite 3 months, and my number jumped up over 100 points. I said, well, that's why it did it. And so we went back and retroactively looked at all the data that we had brought in, and took patients at their word that they're taking the supplements that we sell MacuHealth, so the supplements that they buy from us. And what we saw is that the average MacuHealth user that we were able to pull had been on it for about 5.5 months and had over 100-point increase on their life meter score. And those that said, I don't take anything, over a 12-month period had like a 10-point increase. And I'm kind of rounding the numbers. Interesting enough, we had a handful of patients who say, no, I take something else. And we didn't write down what it was because I wasn't actively doing a study at the time. And almost all of them went down in number.
Really?
So, So I don't know what it was. I don't know if it had anything with eye stuff in there. They were just the ones that we noted that they said, no, I didn't want to buy anything from us because they take something else, whatever the something else was. I don't know. And but I just the stark difference in what we saw on MacuHealth users, and then tying that to the anecdotal, hey, my night vision feels better. They're not a specific I couldn't do this and now I can, but it was just always better. It was always just a happier. They could the quality, the speed of their responses seemed to be quicker in the when we re-refracted them. So
that's brilliant, and that's consistent with what we saw in CREST normal trial over a 12-month period. We're just finishing a trial now with athletes. Myself, I have a PhD student in Singapore working with the Olympic athletes.
Oh, cool.
In archery, shooting, and this data is literally hot off the press. We're analysing it this week, so I have the initial data, which is really exciting. So hopefully I'll have some for when we go to the exchange to present some new data there. So that's going to be very exciting to see the effect that this has had on these.
That'll be huge. And I'm glad we got you to fly all the way across the pond. So
yes.
So for anybody who's attending the exchange, I think if I remember right, you're going on Wednesday afternoon.
Wednesday afternoon.
Right?
That's my understanding.
Yep. And well, hopefully we're on the same page because you need to be there. So Wednesday afternoon, and then and you're going to talk about your vision for vision. So I love this concept.
Yeah.
Like I said, because I think it's bigger than just sick care, right? It's really truly healthcare.
Exactly. Yeah. And do you have that data you were going to show me, or
Yep, I was trying to.
Don't worry about it.
Nope, I couldn't find my button to open the.
No problem.
Technical data here. Here we go. So it hasn't been published. It's early numbers, but this is just plotting it on a time. So if those who are listening, feel free to jump over to YouTube and they can look at it. But that MacuHealth, the first bar, and change in the life meter score. So this isn't what their score was, but it's just the change from their baseline score. And we, if they purchase MacuHealth from us, that's how we assumed that they're on MacuHealth. It's a fair assumption.
Yeah.
That in the average time in 5.5 months, they were jumping almost 110 points.
I mean, it's a lovely way to present the data, and I don't, showing the change, because that's what you should be interested in. So compliment that. I'd be interested to know what your starting point was, because what we see here in Ireland is, we're walking around with suboptimal levels,
Yes.
so which is linked to normal dietary behavior. So it's indicative of the problem, really, a devolution in these nutrients. So, and the fact that you see this type of change when you use a supplement like MacuHealth, shows you why we see so many positive effects in our trials, because we have no non-responders when we use the 10-10-2. Mm-hmm. So we have enough power in our sample to be able to drive the effects that we're testing. If it's vision, you mentioned glare disabilities, we measure all these things in the lab. I would propose and predict that the other supplement, the reason why there's no response at all, basically, is that other supplement was probably a supplement that a patient, got in a health store or was recommended, and that a supplement has not been tested. And the one thing our work has shown at the moment with Supplement Certified is that, over about 70% of carotenoid supplements on the market do not have in the supplement what is on the label. Right. And we're going deep into this now because we have a PhD program called the Label Study currently underway, and I'll be presenting some data on that as well. But basically, we believe that we need doctors to be protected by improved regulatory for food supplements, and companies that are doing it right and have their products tested and have them certified. These companies should be supported and protected as well. So there's a piece of work to do to make the whole environment around supplements and the right supplements. But that has to be the reason. Non-response likely means that it's just not there at all in the supplement. I'd be very interested to see the colour of those supplements. That would be something that you could look at. If they're in powders, they're going to degrade very quickly. And majority of these lutein supplements are in powders because they're cheaper to make. But they won't last in powders. They'll be oxidized. And they need to be protected from light. And there's lots of other reasons as to why this would happen. So that's very interesting data. And great to see it coming from the clinic directly. Congratulations.
Yeah, thank you. That's what we like tonight. I mean, the other category has multiple different supplements in there. And like I said, we didn't track it because I wasn't looking at doing a study. Curiosity made me want to go back and look, although being able to now tell patients that, hey, when we look at our data from our patients who come in these doors that we measure, right, in 5.5 months, we're seeing, on average, a 100-point increase in your scores. And I don't have it in front of me, but the baseline scores are very low, right?
Okay,
in fact,
they were low to begin with?
We're very low to begin with, which just tells us that we're walking around unhealthy, and I don't think that's a surprise. In fact, when we first got the life meter, I called them up and said, hey, I think I have a broken model because there's no way they're this bad. And they said, oh, yeah, it is. And now I come to trust that, it's that bad. Anecdotally, the few patients that I have switched off of, the other supplements, they've all seen an improvement. And,
Great.
So
did you do any vision measurements? Have you done any contrast testing? Or again, I know that's challenging in a busy clinic, but did you get to do?
I haven't because, like I said, I wasn't intending on doing a study. I had heard from a handful of patients, so we knew that. So we got the life meter because my team demoed it and said, "Oh my gosh, this is awesome." We talk about it, but it's hard for us to make it real when we talk to patients, and so we brought in the life meter during a remodel of the worst time to ever bring in new equipment because we were operating during the remodel. So every night they'd have to package it back up so that it would stay safe. And then we saw our MacuHealth sales double. We didn't bring it in to sell more MacuHealth, but we saw patients coming back and buying more of it, which means that that they, I don't want to say bought in because I don't like that phrase, but they were believers in what it was doing for them. The team was certainly a believer for it. And then I had a couple patients just, tell me the anecdotal cases like I shared earlier. So I said, I'm curious, went back, pulled the data, just did a data dump and looked at the numbers. And I would not have guessed it would have been this dramatic and stark. But so, going forward, I would like to do more quantitative testing so that we could look at it. But from a hey, this is what we do in the busy clinic, it sometimes doesn't always correlate with what the papers show out of a research lab. So it's nice to see that
it does.
We had the effect that we had.
I think that's the nice thing about the life meter because, some of the measurement of macular pigment in the clinic is very difficult. We use imaging now with dual wavelength autofluorescence using a Heidelberg system. You can use flicker, heterochromatic flicker photometry, which is highly subjective. It requires strict protocols. It requires skilled operators and so on. And it's very time consuming. And it gives you kind of limited type of data. Here, you're equally just getting a screening of what's going on. But, would I be right to say that, do you have a technician do this, or is it an optometrist that does the measurement?
No, honestly, it's even straightforward. So it sits at the front desk. I have Angie as our front desk patient care coordinator, and happiest, bubbliest person you'll ever meet. And every patient that comes in, she welcomes them and immediately pulls them right over. I think she's got it down to a science. It might take her, 30 seconds to have it done. And so patients now come in, they already know the routine. They're looking forward to it, right? It's, what's your number? And then she's got the little tear-off sheet that she writes it down on them. We we recorded the scores in their records, so she'll write down their last score on there and celebrate if there's an improvement. And you always want to celebrate. It's like going to the dentist, right? You get no cavities at your checkup. Everybody celebrates. And but it's really we wanted it not to be a scary thing. We wanted it not to be overly produced or only a doctor-only thing, because nutrition shouldn't be a doctor-only thing.
Yeah.
You know, if you can go to a big box store and buy a whole bunch of supplements, you know, everybody should be able to talk about it. And so quite frankly, they've already bought the Maggie Health 8 times out of 10 before they ever come back and see the doctor.
Okay. Well, great. I mean, it's, as I said, and did you notice a certain age profile of, you say you do it for everyone, but like what's your youngest patient that's done this? Because we're now using this in schools. We're going into schools doing this with kids and talking to them about their lunch. So it even has that app.
Really, if the young patient can, you know, be still enough to put their finger in the life meter, then they get red on it.
They get red. Yeah.
When we talk about it, we use with the kids. We talk a lot more about the Vision Edge Pro, and it feels different. It's kind of nice, even though the what's in it for the most part is the same, except for the additional omegas, right? But it's a different conversation sometimes. That it's easier to have with mom and a lot of young athletes on that. And then Mackie Health, typically we use Mackie Health more for once we start early AMD issues. Everybody else is on Vision Edge Pro. And then once you get into intermediate and beyond AMD, we move them over to the Plus. But it makes it really nice. Everybody in the office knows how to talk about it. We've educated them on it, and really them seeing the improvements in patients, it builds trust, and that's 100% what we need.
That's great. Yes, awesome. Yeah, we've come, like, if you think about it, we started at, you know, working with people who had these vision problems, and now we've come all the way back to understanding the application for society and for athletes and for military and, you know, sport performers. And then actually, if you look deeper and go back again, you look at the expecting mother and what happens to her carotenoid profile. It becomes destroyed and devastated because she provides it all to her developing baby. And then some wonderful signs. We'll see all this at Bond this year, the Brain and Ocular Nutrition Conference. It's this July in Boston. We're going to see work on, you know, the importance of, you know, the developing retina and the developing brain, which is like, we think we have oxidative stress to contend with. They have 3 times the amount, because their tissues are working harder to even develop. So there's vulnerability, and then we have data that shows that what we achieve very early on in the equation has a positive impact on what happens once we get out the door in terms of start to develop and brain development. So cognitive abilities now are significantly impacted by what happened when we were just developing. And there's an opportunity here to protect mothers as well, which links in, you know, to the trauma and challenge that a wonderful mother goes through when she's supporting the development of a child. Yeah. We forget about that. They'd be like, that's exactly what they do. They give all the good stuff away. Yeah. And carotenoids are crucial and key to that, and the omegas as well. So why not make more available for mom too? And that's what the data is clearly showing. And that's why I have this expression when I'm asked, who should we? Are you saying that it's not just for AMD? That's exactly what I'm saying. Yeah. This is from the cradle to the dance floor. And if we don't get this right now, you know, we're missing a great opportunity to make people healthier. And that, in a nutshell, is a vision for vision and health 3.0.
I love it. Well, I can't wait to hear the full the full deep dive, and I know we've just scratched the surface of it here. So those who are attending the exchange definitely don't want to miss Wednesday night and Wednesday afternoon when Professor Nolan is in. And then I'm looking forward to when you've got your additional data from your athlete study.
Yes, thank you. Yes, hopefully it'll be out in the coming months. Yeah, we're in the middle of data analysis now, so it's an exciting time.
That's super exciting time, and everything you're talking about, it makes sense. And I think it's funny sometimes as doctors and scientists, we look at the data so much and we crunch it, we forget to step back and just what makes sense.
What makes sense? Yeah. Well, awesome. Congratulations on your work, Aaron. Yeah. Talk to you soon.
Likewise. Thanks, John.
Bye bye.